Yo guys, it's JJ here, and today I'm going to be walking you guys through how to make a Yeat beat, especially for his new album that just dropped called Afterlife. Sounding super dope, super hard, super Yeat-like. So before we get into this, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. We're on the way to 1,000 subs, so all support is appreciated. And I got a bunch of free drum kits down below in the link, so make sure to go grab that. But without further ado, let's just get into this. First things first, I got myself an instance of Analog Lab 5, and I'm using a preset called EP7070. Weird name, but that's what it's called. Essentially, it's just a synth. And as well as that, we've got this in the BPM of 140, key of G minor, but we do change it all later. So from what you guys can see, we've got a nice little pattern. Honestly, it just repeats every 2 bar, but what we've done is it has a bit of variation at the end of the 4. But to walk you through it, as you can see, first of all, with this G here, it's essentially just a minor chord. However, I just take away that middle note, and then I play around with the octave, as you can see here, just giving it a nice little bounce. And then same thing down here, it's essentially another chord, but then just play with the bounce of it, changing the octaves. Then we've got this nice little chord playing along here. Again, it would have been a major, but take away the G. And then I did this nice little like effect thing here when I was on Magnet's half step, allowing me to like shorten the notes a bit, giving it a bit of like a stab effect, and taking the chord back down. And as you can see, we essentially just rinse it and repeat it. But for a change in the end, instead of leaving the A to play out, I drag it back in and then use the D up to the D sharp, and it kind of plays back nicely back into the D. But as you can see, again, we're using quite a lot of notes and tension from here and these notes up here, and even down here, to be honest. As you can see, it's literally all over the place. We're just playing them in different octaves though, and the only note that's really not from any of that tension note scale thing is this one G here. So keep that in mind when you make these Yeat kind of beats, and this is literally the main progression that plays throughout the whole thing. But enough with my yapping, this is what this synth sounds like. And there you have it. Sounds super dope, super hard, super Yeat-like. Great vibe to start with. As for effects, it's a basic EQ, to be honest with you, just cutting out a lot of the lows, and then a bit of reverb on top of that. And before we continue, that's going to be the main case for a lot of things here. But the last thing I did for this one sound, I also started separating it around 30%, widening it in the mix a bit, you know, just doing that. Next up, for the melody, we got ourselves, of course, a bell, and we all know what bell we're on about. Is that tubular Yeat bell that we all love. And as you can see from the pattern here, just to make it a bit more clear, these are the notes we've got laid down. Starting off at the G, going down to the D, G, then D, sharp, and then back to the D. And it just repeats for the 4 bar. Again, it's essentially just following the root notes of the first progression, so that's what I just did. But without further ado, this is what it sounds like. And there you have it. Quite simple, straightforward, but does the job really well. And also a thing I need to point out, when I use the bell, as you can see, I right click and click cut itself. So when the bell plays and another note plays, they don't clash each other's frequencies. It doesn't sound muddy. I just want to let you guys know. As for effects, very simple EQ, cutting out pretty much all the lows that are accessible, and then a pretty heavy amount of reverb, as you can just see from here. Next up, we got ourselves a instance of Expand 2, and I'm using a preset called Pictures, and if I'm not wrong, yeah, it's from the Soft Leads bank. It's a very nice lead, and all I actually did, as you can see from here, is play like these kind of like bouncing notes with the occasional case of where I have like another note in between. Because if you see, if I remove it, I have like this one little gap in between, but there's an occasion where I'll have another note. Again, these notes are the part in tension, you know what I'm saying, giving that nice little deep dark vibe. Same here again, using these notes A and B, or should I say A and A sharp, then taking it down back to the D sharp and D here. And if I zoom out, as you can see for the 4 bar, it's essentially just 2 bar looped over. It's again this 2 bar looped over, creating this nice little 4 bar. And if you zoom fully out, it's essentially the same pattern repeated. However, on the very last part of this 8 bar, I just switched it up. Instead of having it climbing, I had it kind of like cascading downwards back into the thing. But that's essentially the pattern, as you guys can see. Take your time looking at it if you need. But this is what it sounds like. And there we have it. As you can see, it sounds super dope, super Yeaty vibe. Just because it's a bit of like a stabbing lead, I really find that vibe super nice, so that's why I did it. But for the mix, again, an EQ and some reverb. It's literally just come down to that, because sound selection is key, so if the sound sounds good, there's no need for more effects. And then I started separating this 50%, as you guys can see. Next up, we got ourselves an instance of Analog Lab 2. Next up, we got ourselves an instance of Analog Lab 5 yet again. And I'm using a preset called Derma. This is essentially some like kind of bell thing, and you'll see it now. We've got ourselves a nice pattern here. It's essentially a counter melody, as you can see, because it doesn't really play at the start. It's kind of like this nice little call and response thing, except it's a bit blurred. And this is the pattern I came up with. It's really just a cascading from the G. As you can see, it's a nice little like minor chord we've got going, this little triad, and cascading all the way back down, and then down to the D. And then for this second one here, I essentially did the same. However, I thought it sounded good when I just took a note out and then just changed it back down to a G. Kind of giving like this bouncing back pattern to say. And that's essentially the whole pattern, except at the very end, just taking it down from one octave to another. And that's essentially the counter melody. So without further ado, this is what it sounds like. And there we have it. As you can see, sounds super nice. It's a very ambient sound. It's not exactly synthy, but it really adds a nice little element to the beat, so I really liked it, and I think you guys would as well. For effects, we got a very basic EQ, and again, reverb, but this one is quite heavy in my opinion, and I think you guys could hear it as well when listening. But it adds a lot of ambience to it. It's a nice little change from all the synths, so really nice ton. And for stereo separation, maxed it out 100%, just so it was nice far back in the mix and not too far in your face. Now, last but not least, we got ourselves, of course, the synth bass, you know, filling out this whole. Now, last but not least, we got ourselves a synth bass, and I'm using it from Purity, and the bass is called the Simple Soul Try. I really like using this bass for Yeat beats, and as well as that, it just fills out the beat completely, you know, filling out all that low end that we cut out before. So from the pattern, you guys can really just see it's following the root notes yet again, and it just repeats every 2 bar. And as you guys can see, as for the sound, I've literally got no effects onto it. But then what I did was rendered out the whole melody, took it down 3 semitones, taking it from a G minor down to an E minor, and then this is what the full melody now sounds like in the new scale. And there you have it, super dope Yeat vibe, sounding insanely good for his new album Afterlife. And now let's get straight into the drums. Okay, Adam, play this when I go, play this like part when I go, oh, this is what the melody sounds like in the new scale, because I messed it up before. And there we have it. So now, let's move on to the drums. First thing you all need to know, we've got ourselves a very nice slap clap pattern. Simple, basic, repeats every 4 bar. It's essentially just your standard clap pattern, except I've got this nice little extra clap coming in here. And from there, now we've got the hi-hats. Hi-hats, very simple and straightforward, but I'll walk you through it. It's essentially this 2 bar pattern, literally just looped over for the full 8. And because it's a Yeat beat, I kept the magnet tool on the regular step. And all I did was literally just place these extra notes in between, as you guys can see here. And I just played them once in a while just to get this nice little triplet bounce, because realistically that's all he does. It's a bunch of like triplets if you really want to. But I decided to space it out a bit differently, so I got some triplets at the beginning, 2 back to back, 1 here, and then it kind of just loops over again for the full 4. Then that full 4 goes all the way out to a full 8. So without further ado, this is what the clap and the hi-hat sounds like. And there we have it. Now for the 808. First of all, you guys need to know we're using an 808 called the Yeat 808 or the Busy 808, as you guys can see here. You can essentially just get this 808 sound off Reddit. Really good sound. It's really good for all these Yeat beats in my opinion, so highly recommend you guys use this. As for the pattern, it's a simple 2-bar loop. We're just following the root notes in a standard 808 pattern. But remember, it's from a G to an E minor now, so that's why the scale is a bit different. And the last thing you guys need to know is click Control A, use your right scroller wheel, and what does that give you? Maxing out your velocities, because that thing is super important. Makes your 808s and your kicks hit harder. As for the kick pattern, you guys can see real quick, it's essentially just the 808 pattern just laid down in a kick pattern. Quite simple, straightforward. Clicking Control A again and using that right scroller wheel to max the velocities. So without further ado, this is what the 808 and kick like. So without further ado, this is what the 808 and kick sound like together. And there we have it, sounding super Yeat-like, sounding super dope. I really love this beat, and I hope you guys are enjoying. So last but not least, we got ourselves a simple snap. That was a lie. we've got a snare pattern. But let me just walk you through it. It's essentially just this 4-bar repeated over. Or should I actually just say it's essentially 2-bar repeated, but I'll show you why I say that. First off, we got ourselves just a regular bounce here. Then this bounce coming in here, and I kind of play with the velocities a bit to give it a nice little bit of a vibe for the bounce. Then, instead of just having this play like a regular, instead of having this just play like a regular, 1, 2, 3 back-to-back roll, as you can see, I have it like cascading down, and on top of that, I actually played with the velocities, you could see. Then, I got this nice little 2 back-to-back bounce going down on this lower octave, ducking the velocity a bit, playing this kind of bounce, which is essentially the same as the one I had here, and then this nice little triple roll with the velocities going down, which is essentially the same as this, except I'm not having the change in pitch. And then just copy and paste the 4-bar for the full 8, and there you have it. Straightforward, not as simple, but straightforward. So without further ado, this is what the full beat sounds like. And there we have it. But now it's time for the arrangement of the beat. So for the intro, first thing we've done is we created an automation clip for the tempo. And all you have to do is right click, create automation clip, and it'll just bring you this nice little tempo automation clip as you can see across here. All I essentially did was go to the beginning one and just drag it all the way down. And then for the actual sample pitch, I did the same thing, but I click on the sample, right click here, click create automation clip, as you can see here. And all I did was the same thing, just dragging this down. And as you'll hear just now by demonstrating it, it gives this cool little intro vibe, and I think it really, really suits this beat. So this is what the intro sounds like. And there you have it. As you can see, it sounds super dope. Gives it this nice kind of a glitchy effect for a beginning. Varies it for the artist and the listener. Found it pretty dope, so there we have it. Now onto the actual chorus. As you can see, it's 2 8-bars back to back. We got all the key drums playing at the beginning without the snare rolls. Got the basic synth. Then we introduce a nice little lead pattern for the second half, as well as this nice little snares. Then coming into the verse section, we start off with just again the simple synth, clap, 808, and the 808 and a hi-hat that kicks in a second. When we focus onto the main part of the verse, which is the middle section, we got ourselves the bells that kick in. We got ourselves again this nice little counter melody, which is that other bell, and then all the drums playing together. And then for the pre-hook, it's the synth, bass, bells, and the synth chords. And that's essentially all looped over, as you guys can see. Copy and pasted again for the same chorus. Then we got again the verse and then chorus. And that's the whole structure of the beat. So guys, you've officially made it to the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed watching this. I hope you've learned a lot from it. That's how to make an Afterlife beat for Yeat. Thanks for watching again, and take it easy. Peace.